Hey everyone, and welcome back to Classic Microcomputers. Today we're diving into a really interesting, maybe even an infamous chapter in Commodore's history. Forget the C64 for a moment. Have you heard of this guy? This is the Commodore Plus 4, an ambitious machine with built-in software meant to take Commodore into the home office. I recently rescued this particular one from the depths of eBay and listed for parts or repair, but powered on. Yeah, spoiler alert, it definitely needed repair. So, we'll get into fixing this specific machine a little bit later. But first, let's roll the intro and then find out exactly what the Plus 4 was and why Commodore made it, and why it's often called one of their biggest missteps. Let's go. All right, we're back. So the Commodore Plus 4, where did this thing even come from? Well, cast your mind back to 1984. The Commodore 64 is king of the home computer market, absolutely dominating. But Commodore never won the rest on its laurels and wanted something more. So they envisioned a new line of computers, the 264 series, amid squarely at the productivity users and maybe even small businesses. It was meant to be a step up from the older VIC-20 and potentially a more serious sibling or even successor to the C64. So the star of this series was the Plus 4, and the name itself tells you its main selling point. It came with 4 built-in applications right in the ROM. You got a word processor, a spreadsheet, a simple database, and a graphing program. And think about it. You could turn it on and boom, productivity software ready to go. Didn't have to load it via tape or disk drive. It also boasted a new, sleeker case design compared to the Commodore 64 bread bin, which is the big brown round one. And importantly, it had 64K of RAM. Now, just like the C64, but with a crucial difference. Way more RAM around for you that was usable. Around 60K, or give or take, was available for basic programming. Because of the built-in software, it actually took advantage of less space because of the weird banking they did. Compared to the C64 and its basic. So under the hood, it featured an all-new, all-in-one chip called TED, and which stood for Text Editing Device. It handled graphics, sound, and I/O. Sound good so far? Well, a more professional look, built-in software, lots of RAM for basic. What could possibly go wrong? Well, pretty much everything, unfortunately. Well, its biggest and most fatal flaw was incompatibility. That new TED chip and the slightly different CPU meant the Plus 4 could not run the massive library of software that it was already available for the C64. Come on, guys, you got games, you got business stuff, you've got everything. There was a huge library, thousands of pieces of software out there, and yet this couldn't run it. Even the peripherals were different. There were different joystick ports, a different cartridge port. Nothing matched. Commodore essentially orphaned the machine from its own incredibly successful ecosystem from day one. And while it was aimed at productivity, home computers in the 80s lived and died by their games. The TED chip, unfortunately, was a huge step down from the C64's graphics. And sound capabilities, it lacked hardware sprites. Making smooth arcade-style games was out of the question and difficult. And its sound chip was far simpler and just less capable than the legendary SID chip. So, games that were ported often looked and sounded vastly inferior. And even the built-in Plus software, the 4, which is why I made it was the Plus 4, the machine's namesake here, wasn't exactly revolutionary. It was functional, sure, but quite basic and really kind of slow and buggy. It's not powerful enough for the serious business users and not compelling enough to make games or even C64 owners to switch. People said, it's not that good, and they nicknamed it the minus 60. Get it? For minus 60. Anyways, Commodore also struggled to position it. It wasn't cheap enough to be in the new entry-level machine. That role was intended for its sibling, the C16. It wasn't powerful enough for serious work, and it definitely wasn't the C64 killer for gaming. Hi, little K. It just existed, confusing potential buyers. The result? Well, Commodore decided it was a commercial disaster, especially in the US. Sales were terrible, reviews were lukewarm at best, and very little unique software was ever developed for it. Commodore slashed prices aggressively just to get rid of the stock, and the machine was discontinued within about a year or two. So we're talking 85, 86. So the Plus 4, well, it became a fascinating footnote, a cautionary tale about breaking compatibility and misunderstanding your market. And because they didn't sell well and often ended up stored away, finding one today can be a bit tricky. They're on eBay, but finding a working one, well, that can be harder. Which brings us full circle back to this particular Plus 4. As I mentioned at the start, I bought this from eBay knowing there was something up. You know, when you buy from eBay and you get untested or some nonsense like that, especially when it comes to a Plus 4 power on tested, you can already bet that it's monkeyed up. Take a look at this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go pop the hood on this piece of Commodore history and look at this screen that we got going on. So thank goodness it wasn't completely dead, which would have meant a bad CPU. But we do have our challenges ahead of us, so let's go ahead and get started on this one. Time to kick it open. All right, so I'm suspecting that it's going to be the RAM chips to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and use my desoldering iron to remove the RAM chips, and we'll put some sockets in these bad boys. Should make testing a little bit easier. All right, so first thing we're going to have to do is remove the metal plate on the back of the circuit board. Looks like there's 5 solder spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm going to do this using my desoldering iron. Just get in here. Melting on some solder and suck it up. All right, so metal shield is desoldered. Now it's time to desolder these DRAMs. So same process. All right, so let's go ahead and hit the stop key right now before we go any further. So I went ahead and replaced 2 of the sockets on this board for the RAM chips, and I thought, you know what, I'm seeing similar results, and it's time we take a look at a different thing, something else. Google's our friend in this case. And what I found is that there is a diagnostic ROM that you can either install as a cartridge or put into the system. Well, of course, it goes right here where I'm pointing, and I had to go ahead and find the equipment to go to burn this. And if you've watched our previous episodes, I actually brought back a Logical Devices programmer from the Hamvention. So I get to set this up and used it, spending many days figuring that part out. But I got an EEPROM all built up, and I put it right here. And here's what happens when we get the diagnostic ROM put into place. So this is called like Diag 264, I believe. And if you see, it's really kind of messed up. And I was going through and reading the documentation that went along with it, and it gave me some hints. And I did uh, end up replacing one more RAM chip before I made a kind of an executive decision on this one. So if you'll see, it's still coming up pretty bad, and I'm going to show you here in a sec what RAM chip I replaced. Okay, this is the final piece here I'm going to show you. And then what I did was is I went ahead and I replaced this RAM chip right here below. And even after replacing that, the screen was still bad, had artifacting and all this. And so I made an executive decision that I think it's a bad TED chip in this system. So here's where we take a break, why I order a TED chip. So our TED chip is here. Let's go ahead and get it installed. So one of the first things we got to do is we got to pop this little RF shield and heatsink lid open. And my little heatsink piece had broke off the lid, but I just bent it up so it would go in there. Now that's a TED chip right there. Now what I'm doing is gently trying to get between the TED chip and the socket, and very gently twist to lift the chip out, and there it is. So now with the chip out, I can go ahead and get my other TED chip ready, my new to me TED chip, since they don't make any new TED chips. This came from probably a recovery from another system. Now I'm going to go ahead and get that sucker fitted in there pretty good. And what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to take my little metal foil clip and I'm going to bend it to the best of my ability here and make this little sucker go in there and work. So when I put the lid on here, it will be nice and snug and press down on the chip. And there we go. Our TED chip is installed and ready to go. Alright, so now we can go ahead and run Diag 264 for real, and you can see what it does and what it looks like. So this is with 3 RAM chips replaced. There were two bad ones, and but I have 3 socketed now, so it ain't gonna hurt nothing. And this is our new TED chip. Now the other TED chip would kind of function, kind of not, so but here you can actually see what this looks like. And you can go out there and find the Diag 264 yourself. Now the keyboard will fail because I do not have it hooked up while this is running. And I also don't have, there's some feedback loops for the joystick testing. And something else too. So joysticks will fail. What else here will fail? cassette, serial port, user port. But everything else should test fine in the system now. There is some audio that is being tested, but I don't have the audio hooked up to this, so unfortunately you can't hear it right now. It's kind of obnoxious anyways, and there's the final screen, so in case you want to go find Diag 264 yourself. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video and you got some tips on troubleshooting and repairing your Commodore Plus 4. I love this little wonderful machine and expect to see it more on this channel upcoming as we dive deeper into it with our other vintage computers. Please make sure to like, subscribe, leave us a comment below. Tell me all about the Commodore Plus 4 or your Commodore adventures. I'd love to hear it. And let me leave you with a final picture of this.